Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The blizzard howled across the frozen wastes of Crixus, a moon so cold that even the native Zorathians avoided it. But deep in the ice caves, a lone figure moved with practiced silence. Lyra Solis was 12 now. At least, she thought so. Time blurred when you were the last human in the Andromeda system. Her breath fogged in the air as she adjusted the stolen thermal goggles, their alien tech flickering as they adapted to her human biology. The Zorathian patrol had passed an hour ago, their armored boots crunching in the snow. They never looked down, never checked the caves. Humans were supposed to be extinct. Lyra remembered the day they left her behind. The evacuation ships, the panicked screams, her mother's hand slipping from hers in the crowd. The Zorathians had bombed the colony, and in the chaos, a child was nothing but another casualty. But Lyra refused to die. She scavenged, she learned, she fought. And now, crouched in the shadows with a jury-rigged plasma pistol in her hand, she watched as a Zorathian dropship descended onto the ice plains. They were back. And this time, she was ready. The Zorathians had a name for her now. Crixus Shadow. A myth, a ghost story their soldiers whispered in the dark. Lyra moved like one, silent, lethal, vanishing before they could fire a shot. She had turned the moon's harsh environment into her weapon. Ice traps, ambushes, sabotage. Tonight, she stalked a supply convoy, her fingers numb around the grip of her stolen rifle. The Zorathians were building something. A relay station, maybe. Something important enough to guard with an entire battalion. She didn't care what it was. She only cared that they would regret coming back. The wind screamed across the frozen plains, a relentless force that could flay flesh from bone. Lyra Solis crouched behind a jagged outcropping of ice, her breath steady despite the sub-zero temperatures. The Zorathian dropship had landed an hour ago, its engines still glowing faintly in the perpetual twilight of Crixus. She counted 6 soldiers, tall, armored figures with segmented carapaces that shimmered like oil under the dim starlight. Their breath masks hissed as they spoke in guttural clicks, a language she had spent years deciphering. Another sweep. Command wants this sector cleared before the relay goes online. Still hunting ghosts. One of them scoffed. The humans are dead. Lyra's fingers tightened around the grip of her plasma pistol. Dead? She would remind them. The first strike. The patrol moved in formation, their scanners sweeping the terrain. They didn't look up. Big mistake. Lyra had spent 4 years surviving in these caves. She knew every crevasse, every unstable sheet of ice. She had turned Crixus into her battlefield. A flick of her wrist sent a small detonator rolling across the ice. It was a crude device, salvaged from a Zorathian grenade, rewired with scavenged circuitry. The explosion wasn't loud, but the ice beneath the soldier's feet cracked. One of them let out a startled hiss as the ground gave way, plunging him into the freezing depths below. The others scrambled back, weapons raised. Ambush. Lyra was already moving. She fired once, a single plasma bolt that seared through a soldier's helmet. He collapsed without a sound. The remaining 4 spun, their rifles sweeping the darkness. Where is she? Lyra wasn't there. She was above them. The shadow strikes. She dropped from an overhanging ledge, landing on the back of the nearest Zorathian. Her knife, a jagged shard of alloy, sharpened to a razor's edge, sank into the weak point between his armor plates. He thrashed, but she was already gone, ducking behind a pillar of ice as gunfire erupted. Flank her, one barked. They moved too slowly. Lyra had spent years learning how they fought. She lunged again, this time slashing at a soldier's oxygen line. He staggered, clawing at his throat as the freezing air flooded his lungs. 2 left. One of them raised his rifle, only for Lyra to kick it from his grip. She drove her elbow into his jaw, feeling the satisfying crack of exoskeleton fracturing. The last soldier backed away, his weapon trembling. You're just a child. Lyra tilted her head. On what's left. Then she pulled the trigger. The message. The relay station loomed ahead, its spires jutting from the ice like blackened teeth. Lyra moved silently, slipping past the outer guards with ease. Inside, the air hummed with energy. Machines she didn't recognize pulsed with alien technology. A holographic display flickered. A star map, marked with Zorathian symbols. Then a voice crackled over the comms. Relay Station Alpha, report status. Lyra hesitated. Then she reached for the controls. Her fingers danced across the console, inputting commands she had memorized from stolen datapads. The hologram shifted, zooming in on a sector of space she recognized. Earth, or what was left of it. The transmission continued. Final assault preparations underway. The human homeworld will burn within the cycle. Lyra's blood turned to ice. They weren't just occupying Crixus. They were going to finish what they started. And she was the only one who could stop them. The transmission ended with a hiss of static, leaving Lyra standing in the dim glow of the relay station's control panel. Her fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from the fury boiling in her veins. Earth. The word alone was a ghost in her mind. A place she barely remembered. Green hills, blue skies, the sound of laughter. A home reduced to ashes. And now, the Zorathians were going back to erase even the memory. She clenched her fists. Not while she breathed. A stolen ship and a silent war. The relay station's hangar held a single fighter. A sleek, dagger-shaped Zorathian interceptor, its wings folded like a predator at rest. Lyra had never flown a ship before, but she had spent years studying their tech, dismantling broken drones, memorizing control schematics from scavenged datapads. She moved quickly, disabling the security protocols with a stolen officer's key. The cockpit hissed open, revealing a seat meant for a soldier twice her size. She didn't care. The engines roared to life as she input the coordinates from the relay's star map. Destination. Sol system. Mission. Stop an extinction. The fighter shot into the void, leaving Crixus and her solitude behind. The long dark between stars. Space was colder than Crixus. Lyra had no food, no water, just the recycled air of the fighter's life support and the gnawing certainty that she was already too late. The hyperdrive hummed, warping reality around her as the ship hurtled toward human space. She slept in fits, dreaming of fire and falling stars. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the ship dropped out of warp. And there it was. Earth, or what was left of it. The planet hung in space, scared and broken. Great swathes of its surface were blackened, cities reduced to skeletal ruins. The oceans had receded, leaving behind salt-crusted wombs. But it wasn't dead. Not yet. Because orbiting above it was a Zorathian dreadnought, a monstrous vessel bristling with weapons, its hull marked with the sigil of the High Executioner. And beneath it, descending toward the planet like a swarm of locusts, were drop pods. They were starting the final purge. A one-woman war. Lyra didn't hesitate. She slammed the throttle forward, her fighter screaming toward the dreadnought. Alarms blared as the Zorathian defense systems locked onto her. She didn't have a plan. She didn't need one. The first plasma torpedo streaked toward her. She rolled, evading at the last second, and returned fire. Her shots glanced off the dreadnought's shields. But that wasn't her target. She was aiming for the drop pods. One exploded in a fireball, then another. The Zorathians scrambled fighters to intercept her, but Lyra flew like a demon, dodging, weaving, striking where they least expected. She wasn't a pilot. She was vengeance given wings. The signal. Then something impossible happened. A transmission cut through the chaos. A voice she hadn't heard in over a decade. Unidentified craft. This is Captain Elias Vance of the UEF Remnant Fleet. Identify yourself. Lyra's breath caught. Humans. Alive. She opened the comm, her voice raw. "This is Lyra Solis. I'm the last survivor of Crixus, and I'm not letting Earth die today." For a moment, there was silence. Then, across the scorched skies of Earth, something stirred. Hidden bunkers opened. Old defense systems powered on. And from the ruins of a dead world, humanity's last soldiers rose to fight. Static hissed through the comms before Captain Vance's voice returned, sharper this time. "Lyra Solis. Gods below, we thought you were dead." A flicker of movement on the scanners caught her eye. From the ruins of Earth's moon, a cluster of ships emerged, jagged, patchwork vessels held together by desperation and sheer human stubbornness. The remnants of the United Earth Fleet. Lyra's throat tightened. She wasn't alone anymore. Rust and rebellion. The UEF ships were nothing like the sleek Zorathian warships. These were salvaged freighters, retrofitted destroyers, and jury-rigged fighters, their hulls scorched from a war they'd never truly stopped fighting. Vance's flagship, the Phoenix, limped into formation beside her. Its bridge was visible through the viewport, cracked screens, exposed wiring, and a crew with hollow eyes that had seen too much. "We've been hiding in the debris fields," Vance explained, "waiting for a chance to strike. But we didn't have the numbers, until now." Lyra's gaze locked onto the Zorathian dreadnought. "We do now." The trap springs. The Zorathians had expected a broken world, a scattered resistance. They weren't ready for this. Lyra's stolen fighter streaked ahead, drawing fire while the UEF ships flanked. A battered cruiser, the Iron Will, unleashed a volley of railgun rounds. Old Earth tech, crude but effective. The dreadnought's shields flared under the assault. Then the Phoenix struck, its remaining torpedoes slamming into the enemy's engines. The dreadnought shuddered. For the first time in a decade, the Zorathians hesitated. The tide turns. Lyra didn't let up. She weaved through the chaos, her fighters' guns blazing. Every shot was a scream of defiance, every evasive maneuver a middle finger to the empire that had tried to erase her kind. A Zorathian fighter locked onto her tail. She rolled, letting it overshoot, then fired a single plasma burst straight into its cockpit. It exploded in a satisfying burst of flame. On the comms, Vance barked orders. "All ships, focus fire on their command spire. If we take out their comms, they can't call for reinforcements." The UEF remnant attacked as one, and for the first time since the war began. The Zorathians retreated. The aftermath. Silence settled over the battlefield. The dreadnought, crippled but not destroyed, limped toward the system's edge. The surviving drop pods were recalled, their invasion force scattered. Lyra docked with the Phoenix, her hands still shaking from adrenaline. The airlock hissed open, revealing Vance, a grizzled man with a cybernetic arm and eyes that had seen too much war. He stared at her like she was a ghost. "You're just a kid," he muttered. Lyra wiped soot from her face. "I'm what's left." Then, from the shadows of the corridor, a voice whispered, "Lyra." She turned. A woman stood there, her face lined with grief and hope. Her mother. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The woman standing before her was older than she remembered, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with years of grief. But her eyes were the same warm brown that had once tucked her in at night, whispering stories of Earth's golden age. "Mom." The word cracked like ice underfoot. Her mother, Captain Lyra Solis of the UEF Vigilance, took a trembling step forward. Then another. Then she was running, closing the distance between them in seconds, her arms wrapping around Lyra so tightly it hurt. Lyra didn't care. She buried her face in her mother's shoulder and held on like she was 8 years old again, like the universe couldn't tear them apart this time. Around them, the crew of the Phoenix stood silent. Even Vance looked away, giving them this moment. The reckoning. Later, in the dim light of the Phoenix's mess hall, Lyra learned the truth. The Zorathians hadn't just attacked Earth. They'd hunted the survivors. Her mother had spent years leading raids from the shadows, rescuing scattered humans, building this fleet from scraps. "We never stopped fighting," Ilara said, her fingers tracing the edge of a star chart. "But we didn't have the strength to strike back. Not until today." Lyra stared at the holographic display. The Zorathian Empire sprawled across the galaxy, their territory vast, their fleets innumerable. "And yet, we just made them bleed," she said quietly. Vance grunted. "A scratch. They'll return with twice the force." Lyra's fingers curled into fists. "Then we make sure they're too afraid to." The spark. The plan was madness. But so was surviving alone on Crixus. So was stealing a fighter and crossing the stars to save a dead world. Lyra stood before the remnants of humanity. Soldiers, engineers, children who'd never known Earth, and spoke in a voice that didn't waver. "The Zorathians think we're broken. They think they've already won." She lifted her chin. "So we show them what happens when you push humans into a corner." They would strike the Zorathian shipyards at Cygnus Beta. A crippling blow, one that would buy time for Earth's survivors to regroup, to rebuild. And Lyra. She would lead the charge. The last charge. The battle was a storm of fire and defiance. Human ships, outnumbered and outgunned, wove through the Zorathian defenses like ghosts. Lyra's fighter danced between turret blasts, her shots precise, her movements relentless. One by one, the shipyards fell. The Zorathians panicked. For the first time in their history, they faced an enemy that refused to die. The legacy. When the dust settled, the galaxy took notice. The Zorathian Empire reeled. Their subjects whispered of the humans who had risen from extinction's edge. Rebellions stirred in distant systems. And on Earth, the survivors stepped out of the shadows. Lyra stood beside her mother on the Phoenix's bridge, watching as the first new colony ships launched from the ruins. "This isn't the end," Ilara said softly. Lyra smiled. "It's the beginning." Epilogue. The stars remember. Years later, when the Zorathians finally sued for peace, their diplomats asked one question above all others. How? The answer echoed across the stars. Leave no human behind. And if you do, make sure they're really dead. E&D.